Now we come to the session on energy trade. And it is my pleasant duty to inform you about the people who will be making the presentation. Mr. Nanda, who is the fellow with the Energy and Resource Institute, TERI, New Delhi, he would be the first one to make his presentation, followed by Mr. Salman Zahir, is the Program Director for Regional Cooperation and Integration in the World Bank South Asia region, a position he has held since March 2010, when it was first created. And then we have three discussants, which is Rakesh Kumar, Director, Solar Energy Corporation of India. He has rich and diverse experience of 30 years, primarily in the power sector, and has extensive work experience both in the public and the private sector in reputed companies like NHPC, Power Grid, PTC, etc. And then Mr. Prabir De is the Senior Fellow at the Research and Information System for Developing Countries, New Delhi. He is also a visiting faculty member of the Institute of Foreign Policy Studies. And we have Son Roy, she is the Senior Fellow at ICRIA. So we start with Mr. Nanda. Thanks.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks ICRIA, especially Nishat, for inviting me for this. Before we discuss possibly, the potentials of trade, energy trade between India and Pakistan, it is important to understand, what kind of scheme of things we're talking about. If you think of trade, it could be energy commodity, it could be energy services, it could be of both types. When you talk about energy commodity, you see that mostly this kind of trade happening between energy deficit and energy surplus countries. And you don't see much of intra-industry trade that you see in other sectors. Only a few countries engage in inter-industry trade. I mean, India is of course one of them, that we both import huge amount of crude oil and we export a lot of refined petroleum products. But those are very few, like India, Singapore, very few nations who are engaged in that. Now, in the South Asian context where everybody is energy deficit, and intra-industry trade is not happening, then what kind of trade you can imagine? This would be also because the fact that you are not talking about energy trade as energy and commodity, but energy services. But we have to keep in mind that we have huge deficit situation all over the South Asian region, India, Pakistan, of course, and our per capita energy consumption is among the lowest. And it is also well known that for a particular level of human development, you need at least some minimum energy consumption. Without that, you cannot achieve. Once you achieve that, after that, you can possibly, manage with less, but, some minimum level is needed, which we not yet got for our people. And even in that situation, we have reasonably high energy gap and so-called energy poverty, meaning that a lot of people do not have lifeline energy needs, and that's true all across South Asian countries, including India and Pakistan. Now, so energy demand is likely to grow by as much as 3 times in the next 2 decades, if not more. It of course depends on how we grow, how our income and GDP, and distribution of that also occurs. But what we have seen in recent time that Pakistan is really suffering a lot due to energy scarcity that they're facing in multiple sectors. It could be in gas, oil. It is easier, you can import if you have the money, but gas and electricity, these are 2 sectors where you cannot even import so easily, and that is where, from Pakistani side, it is now very important that they engage in energy cooperation. Now, what we would be looking at possibly complementarity of resources. This is not in conventional sense always, that resources might also include, infrastructural resources that you might have created in some country but not in another country, and which might lead to efficiency in infrastructure use, and of course technology skill and investment opportunities which each other can find. And within that, you have to also look at regional context. Now, you cannot separate India-Pakistan trade from overall South Asian energy situation. In fact, there are good reasons for looking regional, especially when we have discussed over the last 2 days the trust deficit among two countries are not very high. If you regionalize it, it might give you some sort of insurance, that can work as a risk mitigation measure. I will skip this. These are. I just wanted to show how situation is so bad in South Asia in terms of energy access, and people's access to electricity, for example, is pretty bad. And South Asia is, you can see that is very bad. India, Pakistan, South Asia, everywhere. And if you look at OECD Europe, they are probably they're 100%, but you come to our country, 66%, 62%. But mind it, this access is also not complete access. This access might not mean much. You might have the connection, in terms of access, but you might not get the flow of electricity coming to your house. So, those who would be having reasonably, some 22, 23 hours of electricity, probably, there is no data of such that you can claim, but I think it would be probably half of what we show as electricity access. Now, some existing, trade initiatives have already been there, so I just thought it important to note, because you have, opportunity of learning from those examples. We all know that India, Bhutan, Nepal, Bangladesh, in that eastern part of this South Asian, eastern sub-region of South Asia, you have some sort of connectivity now. For a long time, India has been trading with Bhutan and Nepal, and incidentally, though Bhutan is now importer, but Bhutan's first access to electricity came from Indian source. And even now, while India imports a lot of electricity from Bhutan, eastern part of Bhutan still receives electricity from, some northeastern state. And you have, also petroleum products trade happening in some countries, but not in the context of India, Pakistan. India, Bangladesh, Bangladesh also imports coal from India. And Pakistan had electricity trade happening only with Afghanistan with other in the region. This also I will skip because time, just thought reporting some of the initiatives that happen. We are talking about South Asian grid coming up in due course. But as I said, India, Bhutan is a success story, but it might not be a replicable model also. I would not go into details of it, but given that Bhutan is a very small country with huge potential, and their demand is low, and there's a lot of Indian involvement in terms of developing those resources. Huge amount of Indian aid happening that India cannot commit in other countries, so that cannot be a model, but there are lessons to be learned. India, Bangladesh is something that we can look forward to when we talk about electricity trade, because 250 megawatt is already flowing, and they are also talking about getting more. But while 250 megawatt we agreed for a negotiated price, for additional they would actually come to India and buy from Indian market. So you are giving them access to Indian market, they can buy from Indian market and at whatever price they can get from many sources that you have in India. In India, Nepal, this has been happening for a long time, but still it's not really much success to be talked about. It is a long cooperation, but not very meaningful cooperation. And of course, India has now become a major exporter of petroleum products, and this at a time when other South Asian countries, their refining capacity is not very high. And if you look at Pakistan, for example, 60% of their oil consumption happens in interior part, Punjab and on those parts of Pakistan. And if you see, India also have got some refining capacity in Indian part of Punjab. So, those places are not very distant places. You can easily carry that. And if that happened, actually Pakistan might save a lot of money. And what is happening now is Pakistan now is importing much of its refined petroleum products needs from UAE. And incidentally, UAE is the second largest importer of refined petroleum products. And of course, UAE is not importing from India for its own consumption, but it's for shipment to third countries. So you can imagine. And similar happens with, because Singapore is the largest destination for Indian petroleum products. You can imagine Singapore is not the consumer. Bangladesh is, for example, getting a lot of it. You can see some pipeline is there in Pakistan, but it's like up till middle of Pakistan, it's not really going northwards. So, and the Pakistani refining capacity is not also, as I mentioned, very high. And if you look at Indian side, which is another map, you see that lot of lines are moving from Gujarat to Punjab. This is some Sunset energy highway within India. Oil, crude oil, refined oil, LPG, CNG, all sorts of energy moves in that. And it's, and that part is very close to consumption center in Pakistan. So that can be a good news from that Pakistani perspective if they want. Electricity trade, history has turned itself, because in 1998 it was India proposing electricity import from Pakistan. We could not agree on price, but now we are talking that Pakistan imports from India. But by now we have changed situation in terms of Indian market development. So I think price need not be an issue anymore, because now Indian market is competitive. So if Pakistan wants, they can come to Indian market. If India gives access to Indian market, technically that is possible. So they don't have to negotiate price. It can vary depending on market price. So those difficult negotiation part would be over. And you also see that there is, if you want to connect the grid, in Pakistan, that is also kind of energy highway in terms of electricity grid, which is also close to, concentration of Indian in the northern grid. There's a concentration around Amritsar also, which is also not very far. And 2 points have already been identified, and you can easily connect them and trade. And it might happen that today Pakistan will import, but maybe in future sometimes situation might reverse again and India will probably import again. So if you connect them, it would be useful. Then of course, there is also talk about Pakistan importing CNG from LNG from India. LNG will gasify again and export that to Pakistan, because again, as I said, it's part of energy highway moving to Pakistan from Gujarat. We have created huge capacity, and as of now we have excess capacity in the pipelines. And as you know, in energy sector, it's also talked about the so-called essential facilities doctrine, that if you have created some facilities, you don't have to create again all over. Now, that is applicable. If you apply that, across border, Pakistan has good reason to import LNG, because as of now, Pakistan doesn't have LNG import terminal, which can, and to make it take a long time, and connecting this Indian pipeline, as I show here, from Bhatinda to somewhere in Pakistan would be very easy, it can be done in few months. And also you can think of regional grid, and which can be connected with the IPI pipeline and the TAPI, or I don't think Myanmar, Bangladesh, India is that much relevant now. But I think with in the last session also it was discussed. Apart from those price and transmission issues, I thought geopolitical issue involving Iran was also important. Of course, India also worried about that if we today make investment, and if tomorrow what happened in Iraq happens also in Iran, then what happens to my investment? Now, if Iran that problem is being sorted out, so I think there can be revival of interest in that project, and The Pakistan playing some game that Indian concern can be addressed possibly if you make a regional grid, because in that case, if Pakistan stops somewhere in Pakistan, not allowing gas to come to India, if you connect Bhutan with that, if you connect Bangladesh with that, if you connect Nepal with that, I think that would be difficult for Pakistan to do, because they cannot antagonize everybody with one decision. I think that would be very useful. With that, I would just conclude that there are good reasons, there are complementarity in infrastructure development. We can do efficiency, and one point I probably did not expect, that Pakistan has huge amount of coal resources which has not been utilized so far, and India has huge experience in developing coal resources. Though as of now, China is coming and trying to develop that. Even UAE is coming to develop that with no experience. And India's, which has huge experience, including lignite variety of coal, which India has experience at global level, at per global expertise. I think that could be useful because Pakistani coal, it's huge resources. If India has about 3 billion tons of coal, Pakistan have 175 billion tons of coal. Though Pakistani coal is utilizing that is challenging because of the nature of overburden they have, the nature of depth, other geological conditions is very difficult. But maybe if India and Pakistan come together with India's experience in coal development, that would be useful. Thank you.
Now I request Salman Zahir. But may I request all discussants and the speakers to respect the time limit. 10 minutes for the speakers and 5 to 7 minutes for the discussant.
I'll pick up straight away from Nithya because he's already covered the reasons why to trade. I would just add 2 points. One is, I think the big game is to connect to the Central Asian and Iran resources, which are abundant relative to their own demands. And the other one perhaps is, on the other side, is Nepal's untapped hydro potential. There's of course a lot of untapped hydro potential in India itself, and in the future, Myanmar. But in addition to just this resource side of it, I would just like to add the other point which Nithya mentioned, is that it is an opportunity for deepening the interdependence in order to achieve political stability and to widen the discourse away from the security lens and into an interdependent one. My presentation is more about the project called CASA 1000, which is the first stage of connecting the Central Asian and the South Asian electricity markets. It's also a presentation about 2 points: leadership and technical stability. Technical stability includes follow-through, because there will always be a lot of good ideas. How does one translate that into good politics, and how does then one translate that into follow-through, which can be quite multi-year? There are some examples globally. There's of the most sophisticated grid with a lot of grid codes and discipline is the European one, the UCTE, and then others have varying levels of technical connectivity and rules for interchange. In the Central Asia, South Asia context, this will give you both a sense of this is the electricity side, high amounts of power, capability, and low willingness to pay in Central Asia, mainly because the resources are quite cheap and they're able to get electricity quite cheap. On the other hand, in South Asia, we have the highest prices, particularly in Pakistan, but in some cases pretty high in Afghanistan. And in India, the grid is not expensive because we are quite dependent on low-cost national coal. We are having trouble even paying for electricity based on imported coal, whereas all our neighbors have gotten an addiction to oil-based generation. And I think that, again, creates a certain amount of opportunities. I think at the household level, a lot of us are still burning oil in order to, it's a coping strategy, whether it's a building level generator or a generator in your backyard, or if you're burning kerosene for lighting. All of those coping strategies are oil-based, but it's not part of the public supply system. There's been talk in the South Asia energy, the SAARC energy ring. Some of these things are already happening. Afghanistan is getting in a local grid considerable amount of power, maybe 100 megawatts from Turkmenistan, a certain amount in Herat from Iran. The power supply from Uzbekistan, which started in 2009, I think if anybody was in Kabul before 2009 and after that, I think the transformational effect of getting 140 megawatts coming in at an affordable price from Uzbekistan cannot be understated. It changed lives in Kabul, and people sometimes don't remember that period, but you know how things changed after that. Tajikistan is now also supplying to Afghanistan. The challenge then with CASA 1000 is to take the experience from that, both about political stability, the security, and extend that to Pakistan. The electricity line from to Bangladesh was commissioned in November, is my understanding, and by December it was already operating at 500 megawatts. So I think it is a rational choice for a variety of reasons. These are some of the reasons. I won't go into them just to stick with the time, and some of them were covered by Nithya as well. In the case of CASA, which will pick up on one particular thing, is that it is a 1,500-kilometer line, but the beauty of it is that for 6 months in the year, the power plants in Kyrgyz Republic and Tajikistan do not generate electricity because there is no demand. So you have something like 6 terawatt hours, or equivalent to something like 1,800, 2,000 megawatts of electricity just spilling because there is no local demand. On the other hand, at the same time, Pakistan is burning an equivalent of something like $400 or $500 million of oil in order to meet its summer peak requirements. Afghanistan is also burning a certain amount of oil at that time, but less than they do in winter. So it's being structured as a summertime supply only line. I think this is very important because obviously it has surplus capacity in the rest of the year. If confidence is built around this, Uzbekistan, which has surplus energy, may want to tap into it. Turkmenistan, which has surplus energy, may want to tap into it. So it is really a test case project. It provides open access. The structuring of it is done. The cost, as I've mentioned, is here. These are some of the reasons why the 4 countries have come together in order to take this forward. And it does an important part of, again, coming a little bit into the political domain, because this is very political, is that just for Afghanistan to demonstrate its credentials as a safe passage country, I think what does it take? How do you get local communities to be stakeholders in this? When they're seeing a superhighway going by them and they're not actually part of it, what are the mechanisms which will get them to be interested? In the future, if copper ore or iron ore, which is being mined over there, also goes by, what's in it for the local communities? Why should they be part